solve quadratic equations by factoring. And so first of all, we need to define what a factored form of a quadratic equation is. Now a quadratic equation, if you remember, is an x squared equation. That is your highest power. And so here the factored form is 0 equals a, which is any number. Okay, it could be a 2, a 3, it doesn't even need to be there. It could be a 1. Okay, times x minus p and times x minus q. Now a little bit about p and q. Those are known as the x-intercepts. So pretty much what you were doing yesterday when you were graphing, using that graphing technology, when you found the x-intercepts, you were doing nothing more than factoring. Okay. So let's go ahead and look at this first equation, our first question. It says write a quadratic equation in standard form with 6 and -1/4 as its roots. Okay, this is a very, very easy problem. Let's go back to the factored form of a quadratic equation. Now I'm going to leave a off. Oops, my pen is having trouble. I'm going to leave a off for now. And so this is the factored form. All I'm going to do is replace p and q with 6 and -1/4. Now the easy way to do this, since you notice there are minus signs, you are actually just going to put in the opposite of each number. So my first one is 6, correct? So I'm going to use a -6. My next one is -1/4, so I'm going to use a +1/4. Okay, now what we need to do is FOIL that out, and we need to get an equation, okay, that's not in factored form. So it needs to be like x squared plus 2x plus 3, something like that. So let's start by FOILing. What do you get when you take x times x?
X squared.
X squared. What do I get here? 1/4 x. Okay. What do I get here? -6x. And what do I get here? I'm actually going to write this as 6/4, and you're going to see shortly why. So all I did is took -6 times 1/4. Now notice, one of the things about a quadratic equation is that it couldn't have any fractions. Everything had to be an integer. So I notice I've got a fraction, right? The 4, I got to get rid of it. So I'm going to multiply through everything by a 4. So what is 4 times 0? 0 equals 4x squared. What is 4 times 1/4? 1, because they cancel, right? What is 4 times 6?
24.
Okay. 24. What is 4 times 6/4? 6, because the 4's canceled. See, that's why I didn't simplify that. It's a lot easier to leave it that way. My final step will be to combine my x terms. So my x terms make my middle term what? -23x. And there you go. So remember, you can't have fractions, you can't have decimals. Questions? Okay, do we need to look at another one of those, or do you think one was enough? Okay. If you would, let's just set this up real quick and then we'll move on. This one would be 0 equals what?
X minus 34.
Okay.
X plus 5.
X plus 5, and then what would I need to do? You would need to FOIL it out, and then you would need to get rid of the 4. Okay, so very similar to the previous problem. So then now what we're going to get into is we're actually going to get into where we solve. And this is what you did yesterday. Yesterday you would graph 16x squared plus 8x, and you would find the x-intercepts. What we're going to do now is we're going to solve this algebraically. So when you have two terms, the thing you're looking for is if there's anything in common. So the easy way to do this is to look at the 16 and the 8. Is there anything in common with 16 and 8? An 8. Okay. Next, I'm going to look at the x squared and the x. Anything in common?
X.
X. So what I actually am doing right now is I'm factoring out that 8x. So if I take an 8 from 16, 8 times what number will give me the 16 back? 2. If I have an x squared and I take out one x, what am I left with?
X.
An x. Notice I have my plus sign. 8 times what number will give me my 8 here? 1. And then x, and I've taken out an x, means I don't have an x left. So now we're going to apply that zero product property that is talked about up here on the top of the slide. You've already discussed the zero product property in Algebra 1, so this is not anything new. Basically what this property states is that if I have two terms like I have now, the zero product property states that either 8x will equal 0 or 2x plus 1 equals 0. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to solve each of those individually. How would you solve 8x equals 0 for x? I would divide by 8, so x equals 0, which is what you've already said. Good job. So that's one solution. What would I do over here? So I get 2x to equal -1. Then what I do? Divide by 2. So if I was doing this problem yesterday and I typed this into my computer, this graph would have x-intercepts of 0 and -1/2. So that's how they relate. Let's look at another one. Okay. 6a to the 5th plus 18a to the 4th equals 0. So first thing I'm going to look at are the 6 and the 18. What is in common with the 6 and the 18? 6. Now I'm going to look at the a to the 5th and the a to the 4th. What is in common? A to the 4th. So now I need to think to myself, 6 times what gives me 6? 1. Okay? And then a to the 4th, and I started with an a to the 5th. How many a's are left? 1. Good. Okay? 6 times what number will give me 18? 3. I started with an a to the 4th. I took out an a to the 4th. Nothing's left. So according to my zero product property, either 6a to the 4th equals 0 or 1a plus 3 equals 0. So let's solve those individually. What will a equal here? 0. Now real quick, let's just go through and solve that. Here if you divide by 6, you would have a to the 4th equals 0. And then the question is, well, what does a equal? Well, anything to the 4th power, okay, what's going to cause that to equal 0? Yeah, a has to equal 0. Okay. The actual way that you would find it would be to take it to the 4th root. And then what do I get over here? What does a equal over here? -3. Very good. So, think you can handle those?
Only if we can watch the game out.
Oh, you're funny. Okay, so let's look at this one. There are actually two ways to solve this problem. Okay. There are two ways to solve this problem. What does a square?
Root.
A square root. Okay, now what's always the one thing I tell you to remember whenever you take a square root?
Do it to both sides.
Well, that too.
Do it consistently.
This is something for the ACT. If you ever take the square root of both sides, you make sure you take the positive and the negative. you have to take the positive and the negative. Now on the left side, the square root of x squared, those are gone, and you get x equals plus or minus, what is the square root of 64? 8. So basically, I'm thinking to myself, what times itself will give me 64? And that answer is 8. Don't forget the plus or minus. Okay, let's look at this one.
Nine X.
So, two terms. What's in common with the first? 9 and an x. So 9 times what will give me 81? 9 x, good, minus, perfect. Okay, so zero product property again. 9x equals 0, or 9x minus 1 equals 0. My first solution will be 0. Nice job. What do I have to do over here? Add 1. Oops, not plus, silly. Try that again. Equals 1. And so what does x equal? 1/9. Questions? Oh, now what do we do?
Yeah, 60.
Okay, these are the problems we're going to end with today. Okay, and so this is x squared plus 16x plus 64. They actually aren't that bad at all. What we're going to do is whenever I see a 1x squared here, I automatically know it's going to be two quantities. And the first term in each of those quantities, in this case, will be an x. The reason why it is an x is because x times x gives me x squared, which is my first term. Okay? So the first numbers, when you multiply them, have to be whatever your first term is. So then now, this is the next step. You are always going to look at that last number, 64. So I am looking for two factors of 64. This will tell me they add 2, and this will tell me the number that they add to. So two factors of 64 that add to 16. 8 and 8. Now the last step I need to do is utilize this plus sign. That's the only thing I haven't utilized yet. I have to somehow get a plus 16 from 8 and 8. Positive 8, positive 8. So what those numbers do is those numbers translate to the rest of the parentheses. And so if you notice, I have to now solve this. And so I really get x plus 8 equals 0, or x plus 8 equals 0. You don't need to write it twice. What do you get x to equal? Negative 8. Okay? Now, we're going to look at another one of those. Actually, a couple more. So let's look at this one. Okay? X squared plus 9x plus 20 equals 0. So first of all, I notice I've got an x squared as my first term, two quantities because it is a 1x squared. What goes first? X and x. Now, what number do I focus on? The 20, the last term. So two factors of 20 that add to 9. 5 and 4 does not matter the order. How do you get a positive 9 from 5 and 4? Positive, positive. So I'm going to translate the positive 5 and the positive 4 down below. And I've got two quantities. Either, good grief, x plus 5 equals 0. I don't know why I put the parentheses there. Or x plus 4 equals 0. Oh, my goodness. Okay, so I'm going to go and get rid of those. There's no need. So what are my two solutions going to be? X equals -5 and x equals -4. So let's revisit again what that means. If I were to graph x squared plus 9x plus 20, -4 and -5 would be what? The x-intercepts, good. That would be where they intersect the axis. Okay, let's look at this one. We got two more to look at and we'll be done. X squared minus 4x minus 21 equals 0. So I notice I've got a 1x squared. I won't always have that. Okay, so that's why we've got to check that very first. I know I've got two quantities. What will be first? X and x. What number do I now look at?
21.
So 2 factors of 21. This is different because those 2 factors of 21 differ by 4. 7 and 3. How do you get a -4 from 7 and 3?
-7, +3.
Good job. So I've got a -7, +3. Now some of you may be able to just jump to the answer and not write out my next statement. What would my solution be from here? +7, right? What would be -3? And if you want to do that, that's fine. You don't need to write out that whole other step. It's basically the opposite of the numbers that you find. Okay, let's look at one more, and we'll call it good for today. X squared plus 7x minus 18. So, parentheses. First term in each parenthesis is the x. So now I'm looking for 2 factors of 18 that differ by 7, and you've already said 9 and 2. How do you get a +7 from 9 and 2? +9, -2. And so my two solutions will be -9 and +2. Questions? Okay, here's your assignment. Page 242, 17 through 34, 37 through 41. So let's go ahead and look real quick at 242 to make sure we understand what we're doing. All right, so the very first one, 17. Write a quadratic equation in standard form with the given roots. I'm going to give you a hint on 17. They only give you 1, 0, right? What do they give you? 7. So the first quantity I'm going to write is x, and then remember you use the opposite of 7, so it'll be x minus 7. The other 0 will be the exact same, x minus 7. So remember you need to then FOIL that out and go from there. Okay? I think that should be good. Page 242. Okay? So